Welcome to the DIY Writer Show with the mild-mannered, slightly heroic host, Jeff Bacon.
Today, I'm here with Liane R. Grant. Now, Liane has a few books out. She's got Schedule Your Life, Schedule Your Dream, Give Yourself a Raise, and Help! I Have to Work from Home. So, guess what we're going to talk about today, kids? Time management. With that, I'd like to introduce Liane. Liane, how you doing today?
I'm doing great here in cold Quebec.
Cold Quebec. You were just telling me that you had a little bit of snow up there. Was it just a light sprinkling of what, 6-9 inches? What?
Just some wet snow the other day. We usually get that by the end of October.
By the end of October? Happy Halloween, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, we are going to talk all about time management today and your book. So the most prevalent one that you have out there right now is help. I have to work from home. Oh my gosh, that's been a struggle for everybody for the last 6 months. What can you tell me about the book? What does it go over? What does it attack? What does it help?
Well, I like to see it as a kind of survival guide for people who are not used to working from home.
Okay.
So there are some basic things that they might not think about, like how to set up their workspace, how to set up their own schedule, and how to avoid distractions while they're working and things like that.
Aren't distractions just a normal part of work, Liane?
Well, we can't eliminate them completely, but there are some things we can do to minimize them.
Do you schedule your distractions?
I
Mine
wish
just
I
pop
could.
up. I just, just kidding. So you, your whole, this, and you have some online classes that all deal with time management and how to set things up and everything. So if I was, say, a struggling podcaster / author that seems to have 1,200,000 things to do every day and can't seem to get enough done, let's say we're talking about a friend of mine who's very disorganized. What advice would you give this friend of mine to straighten out his life a little bit so maybe he can get some more stuff done?
Well, first I would say set up your workspace to be as ideal as possible. And for me, the first component of that would be if you can have a door that you can shut, that is perfect.
Okay. What about a fancy chessboard? Should I get rid of that, or is that just a
Oh,
distraction?
that's
Or
nice.
that's okay. Well, you know,
So if you can have a door that you can shut, that helps minimize the distractions. But
okay.
also, when we work in an office, we don't have a lot of control over the decor and things like that. So as you
Mhm.
mentioned, your chessboard, it's nice to have some personal things around you that make you feel calm and happy.
Yeah, calm and happy. So I look around my room. It's not calm and happy. It's death and despair, I think. But I am a dark. I write dark fantasy, so it has to be that way. So, what kind of advice do you give the person that takes on way too many projects and never gets anything done?
Oh, that's fun.
That's the guy where we're
This is
talking
your
to a
friend.
lot of authors out there right now. So I mean, they're the ones that are going, oh my gosh, I need to get my book done. And they're trying to write, some are between 1,000 and 10,000 words a day, trying to knock that novel out. So I mean, what kind of a tip would you give them?
Well, the ironic thing is when I wrote Schedule Your Dream, it was a dream that I had put on hold for a long, long time. So the year that I turned 50, I decided I'm finally going to write a book. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it and called it Schedule Your Dream because I wanted to show people how I had carved out time in my busy schedule to do something that was really important to me. And so, there's different ways that you can approach a problem like that. You can say, I'm just going to stop doing this and stop doing that. But I had several things in my life that were really important to me. I was in the middle of doing my PhD in translation, and I didn't want to give that up. Obviously, I wanted to have time for family. I was involved in my church and other things. I was leading a volunteer translation team. So I did not want to stop doing any of those things. So the only option was to become more efficient with my time.
Okay.
So I kind of did some personal research alongside my doctoral research project. I did personal research into time management and learned from a lot of other people um, how to use my time more efficiently. And when I got to the end of my doctorate and I added up the number of hours that I had invested,
Mhm.
it was about 50% of the hours that they say it will take you to do a doctorate. So I felt like my time management research had really paid off. And I guess the other thing I would like to mention is in the time management space, there are a lot of popular authors already. Most of them are male. And I felt like they might not necessarily understand all of the challenges of a female in organizing her time. And so
Absolutely not. We're idiots. We focus on what we want to do, and then no, I'm actually kind of being serious. We are. I mean, a guy can come in the house and just kind of flop everything down, and I've got to go do this, and then just disappear. And the woman's sitting there like, okay, I had this and this and this to do. I had, I've got the kids, I've got supper cooking, I've got, and it's just like, okay, fine, disappear. It's like being ghosted, but in your own house
yeah.
type thing. And so, but yeah, I can see where a guy just take time out of your busy schedule and to take this 15 minutes for meditation and take this and that and everything else. Whereas in your shoes, you're like, meditation. That is 2 o'clock in the morning when everybody's sleeping.
Yeah, and I think maybe men have an easier time saying no and just saying, I'm just not going to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it would be good to have a female perspective on the topic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
I
I
think.
read some interesting statistics in some research articles about uh, they show in a survey that on average, an employee will lose an hour a day in personal cell phone use,
Mm-hmm.
an hour a day searching for papers and information.
Sure.
And then I would estimate another hour trying to figure out what to do next after you complete one task. So I have
Yeah.
some tips that kind of help solve those three things.
The only thing I would say, and I've managed a lot of employees in my long and illustrious life and career, and being a corporate hack, is that the 8-hour workday is a lie. It really is. Because you're never going to get 8 hours of work out of anybody unless they're psychotic or but I mean, there's conversations that happen, there's, you sit down and have one issue that you need to discuss, and it jumps into this, that, or the other thing. And all of a sudden, hey, what you doing this weekend? That type of stuff. I mean, there's that social aspect to work that happens when you're in an office, and especially when you start developing, relationships with people and everything. One of the things that we did, being a IT guy, is we'd monitor, like social media type stuff and everything. And depending on what role they were in, we would limit that to, certain times of the day, or a certain amount of time that could be spent on these types of sites. Um, but still, again, it didn't really increase performance all that much. It just shifted what they did from one device to another, or maybe something that wasn't controlled by our network or whatever. Um so when you talk about scheduling these things and you lose an hour here, you lose an hour there, you're really talking about your personal responsibility for what you're trying to do in the job and getting the job done. I mean, if you can get the job done in 3 hours, what do you do with the rest of the other five?
Oh, I've always found projects to fill up the rest of the
Oh,
time.
have you? Okay. Well, you don't want to be
Well,
you don't want to be too good, because then they'll promote you and you have more work to do. Just
yeah.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, and I work from home for myself, so
Mhm.
I'm probably the worst slave driver I've ever had as a boss.
Are you a little hard on yourself?
Well, I like to set goals and meet them, and if I set a goal, I'm going to move heaven and earth to reach it by the deadline if it's within the realm of possibilities. So I just find it challenging.
Cool. So anyway, since I rudely interrupted you with my spiel on corporate America, let's talk about scheduling your day, and what pieces do you put into place to make sure that you're as efficient as you possibly can be.
Okay, well, very first, and if possible the night before, is to have a clean desk.
Okay.
Now, some people don't realize the stress that all
Just
those
a minute, I
things
got
on
to
their
write down
desk.
my failure number one: clean desk.
So, and I mean, sometimes I have to stop and clean my desk several times in a day because
Mhm.
when you're working on a project, things accumulate and you're jotting down notes here and there and everywhere. And I have a bit of an addiction to post-it notes. So,
Mhm.
um, but I've just found that when I'm having trouble concentrating, if I just stop and clear at least a space on my desk
Mhm.
so that it's not just all jumbled with things on top of each other. I don't think we're really aware of the underlying stress that that causes. But as
Okay.
soon as we clear it off, it's like, oh, wow, that feels good. Now I can concentrate. So
Sure.
that's the first thing that I think that's the top priority.
Okay.
And
Keeping
then
a
this,
clean workspace.
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, sometimes you're just going to have to take it all off and put it in a bag or something and deal with it later. But for the moment, you'll be able to focus on the project you're supposed to be working on.
I personally, I had different piles. So it moved from this week to last week to a month ago to 6 months ago. And if it didn't get handled by 6 months, I threw it away. But I
Okay.
had these rotating piles.
Well,
Yes,
that's
I'm an idiot. Yes.
at least they were in piles. Sometimes it's just a big jumble, right?
Well, yeah, I didn't say they're organized piles. I just said they're
Okay.
piles. Yeah.
So the second thing that I like to do, and again, it's something, it sounds so simple, but most people underestimate the impact that it will have, and that is to turn off all the noises. So I'm talking computer volume, your phone, your tablet, anything else that's plinging and blinging and dinging and
Mm-hmm.
distracting you. I don't think we realize that a distraction that even only lasts 1 second can cost us maybe 5 or 10 minutes in refocusing time. And so I like to turn off all the noises. And again, I mentioned earlier that shutting the door. If you don't have a door you can shut, then we have this universal symbol that means don't bother me, and that is headphones. So
Yeah.
that might work. And also, I've mentioned noise, but there's also visual noise. And so that would be, your little icons that say, oh, you have 25 new emails, or things
Yeah.
that pop up. So there's this visual noise, this visual clutter as well. And if we can eliminate that, it's really easy to focus.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, just because the main focus of this podcast is authoring.
Mm-hmm.
A 1 minute distraction while I'm writing, it can take me up to 20-30 minutes to get back into it.
Yes.
Realistic. I mean, I just, somebody comes in and asks you a question and you're like, yeah, sure, white bread, that's great.
So when I
Oh.
when I wrote Schedule Your Dream, I actually wrote it in the mornings. So I would get up super early,
Mhm.
and there was nothing to distract me, literally. And I would spend an hour and a half each morning writing that book. And it took me, I think, a couple months. And I didn't even tell anybody that I was writing a book. This is my
Oh,
first book. I didn't know it was going to work.
it was a covert operation, huh?
My husband didn't even know when I told him, oh, I wrote a book and I'm going to publish it. He's like, what?
Surprise.
But I literally had no distractions because I was working early in the mornings. And so if you have a project, either a project that's really important to you that you can't seem to get to, or you have a project that you've been procrastinating on a long, long time, this might be a good solution, is to give it absolute top priority, literally before anything else in the morning.
Yep. A friend of mine who's also a mentor, he does what he calls the Princess and the Pea routine. So he gets up early in the morning and he writes. But the night before, he makes sure that, he's got the document is up on his computer. He
Hmm.
just moves to his home office. His coffee pot is set and his timer is set so that when he walks in, he can just grab a cup of coffee, and that if he needs a snack, that snack is sat out. I mean, he sets up his desk perfectly. So the next day, all he has to do is get up, throw his bathrobe on, sit down, coffee, write, and that's the first 2 hours of his day.
Awesome.
And, yeah, he said just everything's right there. He's, his slippers are at the side of his bed. So when he swings his legs out, they slip right into the slippers. His bathrobe's right there, wrap up, boom, done. And there is nothing that stops him from moving from point A to point B in the morning. Everything is bing, 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 sit down, right.
So
And
basically what he's done is he's eliminated all the decision fatigue that usually happens in the morning before we start work.
mm-hmm,
So that just means, if you have to decide, am I really going to get up or am I going to press snooze? What am I going to wear?
yep,
What am I going to eat? Am I going to exercise or not? All these decisions. And then before you even start working, your brain's tired from having to decide all these things. So it sounds like your friend is doing all this ahead of time. And so his mind is still clear when he sits down to work.
yep. He says that when he wakes up, he starts thinking about writing, and everything else is just robotic.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he doesn't even remember, really getting out of bed. Just all of a sudden he's sitting there typing, and oh, I'm writing, yeah, and there's a cup of coffee, and okay, cool, snacks and whatever, and boom, done. So, and I always thought that was really, a great way of doing things. I don't do it, but I think it's a great way of doing things.
Well, and I think you have to know what works for your personality.
Hmm.
Some people, if they don't exercise in the morning, their brain is not going to be fully
Hmm.
engaged. So we have to find out what really works for us. And I think the consistency is key. If you have your own routine, it doesn't have to look like anybody else's, but if you have something you follow where you don't have to make the same decisions every day, you just know you're going to do this in this
Hmm.
order, and then you've not used up much brain energy when it's time to sit down and write or work.
That's very true. I probably have 10% of the brain energy that you have, so I can't expend it all that much, but just saying. So, your process for writing was get up early in the morning, do it, and then surprise your husband with a book. That's pretty interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and there are different approaches to writing. So some people like to write as fast as possible in draft form.
Hmm.
My approach is a little different, and it's probably because I'm a translator. I'm a certified translator.
Hmm.
And so I've found with translation that it seems to be more efficient to take my time and do a really good job the first time and then have to do a light revision after than to just do a draft and have to rework it and rework it. And so I've used the same approach when I'm writing in my own language. So I take my time, and I, if I need to look something up and get a fact straight, I do that usually while I'm writing. So at the end, it's basically more of a proofreading than a full editing. And I just find that works well for me. But not everybody approaches it that way. Some people just need to get the words out and they'll fix them later.
Hmm. Yep. I work on the actually have a coffee cup with my my writing routine on it. It
Oh,
says,
okay.
write rough draft, rewrite rough draft a third time, send it to an editor, drink extensively, write the fourth rough draft, send it back to the editor. And it also, I have one that has all the document revisions on it that, the last one is I hate my life, but whatever. I don't know. I haven't written a nonfiction, for myself.
Mhm.
And the process for nonfiction, you have kind of the points you want to make, and it's a little bit shorter book usually. I mean, not always. I mean, it just depends on what the topic is that you're talking about or whatever. But they almost seem like they're a little bit easier to me. They are versus fantasy and fiction. It's like, okay, you're building this entire world. You're doing this. You're doing that, and then you wake up in the middle of the night. It's like, oh, I messed that up. But my schedule is a little different than yours. I stay up late at night and write
Okay.
because my wife gets up early, and whoever gets out of bed first wins, because the other one is because as soon as we get up, one of the kids gets up. I
Yeah.
have a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old right now, and one of them gets up and needs attention, so it's the other one that gets up with the kids.
Well, and you have to consider when your energy levels are highest, So that's not the same for everybody. For me, it's the morning, and that's when I get my best work done, is before noon.
Isn't
But
that
for
why
other
they
people,
invented Red Bull?
yeah. But speaking of fiction, that's interesting. I've never tried to write fiction, but I am an avid reader. I
Mm-hmm.
have been all my life. And so I if I pick up a fiction book, well, pick it up. It's usually on my tablet now.
Yeah.
And I get into a couple pages, I'm like, this is just difficult to read. It's not flowing. And I can recognize when someone is not writing fiction well, but I
Mm-hmm.
have no idea how to create it.
Well, it depends on what resonates with you and what it how in depth it gets how in depth you get the reader into the story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only reading a couple of pages and you're like, oh, this is not going well, it's not registering with you, it's not clicking with you, or maybe it's poorly written. I mean, who knows? And or maybe it's just not your type of fantasy, you know, but you're just not into it. I mean, you should be able to, as a writer, hook somebody into at least finishing a chapter, you know,
Yeah.
or some,
Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of techniques behind it. So, with, like you mentioned, with nonfiction, it can be easier, especially if you're a systematic thinker and you're very practical. So
Mhm.
for me, nonfiction is very easy for me to write.
Well, I talk to nonfiction writers, and they're like, I wrote this in a weekend. It's like, geez, okay, that's great. I'm proud of you. I wrote this in a year, type thing. But the purpose of your books is really how to straighten up your life and how to get things organized so that you can be as efficient and as productive as possible. That
Yes, and the underlying thought is, a lot of times we say, "Oh, this is really important to me, but I just can't seem to find the time for it." And so schedule your dream was about making it a priority and making the time for it, finding the
Mhm.
time for it, you know. And schedule your life it's actually a very, very practical book about how to create your own life planners, or you might want to call it a day timer, but personalized for you, which
Okay.
that's what I've done for myself, because I had tried so many generic planners and they just didn't work. So it was about how to create your own, and there's some templates and things like that.
So do you do like full blown project management when you do this, or do you have a system that you use to, you know, your overall project and to determine and assign the task to yourself in a certain time frame? I mean, how do you work that into your day?
My work as a project manager with my translation team. I have to organize. We have like a project right now where we're translating 30 books in 3 years. So
Oh.
with about 20 different people involved in revision, proofreading, layout, all that.
So what project
So
management method do you use?
I actually for that use spreadsheets, but
I mean, do you
for
use Waterfall or Scrum, or do you use Kanban?
no,
No.
if I had a larger team, I'd have to get some specialized software, but so
Okay.
far Excel has worked well for me.
Yeah.
But as far as managing my own time, like I said, I've created my own customized day timer or life planner, I like to call it.
Hmm.
And so on Sundays, it's really important that I sit down and create my planner for the week. Now, obviously, it never goes exactly according to plan, but at least I know, okay, I have this many large project blocks that I need, and I
Mhm.
often end up shuffling them around. But right now with this 30 book and 3 year translation project, I decided I'm going to set aside the mornings for that because there are more interruptions in the afternoons. So, and this is a priority. So I try to work on that until noon every day. And it's slow, methodical progress, but it's amazing when you look back and see what's been accomplished.
Mhm.
Now, in the afternoons, that's where I'm a little more flexible, and I have different, you always have different requests coming in by email, and sometimes that will throw you off. But I try not to look at those in the morning because if they do, I'm not going to do the translation work because I'll think, oh, so and so needs this, and so needs this. So I like to call that stuff the trivia that can wait till later in the day.
Sure. The one thing that I did when I was younger and I started doing again is the day runner system,
Hmm.
where here's all the tasks I need to get done, and this is on Monday. And then the next day when you're starting out, okay, all the tasks that didn't get finished yesterday, you write them at the top and then add the rest of your tasks at the bottom. And I
Mhm.
find that I get overly frustrated by Wednesday if I have to rewrite the task a third time, you know,
It's a
with a
snowball
pen.
effect.
Kind of, yeah. So then, all of a sudden it's like, okay, hunker down, get these things done so I never have to see them again, type thing. But
Well, I have a little system I like to call the task triage.
mhm,
And so basically, I found that most of us, myself included, we're not realistic about how much we can get done in a week. And so what that means is we might have something that's due on Friday and we'll put it off because we think we have lots of time to get it done.
mhm,
And so we'll work on something else that's maybe less important or has an earlier deadline
sure.
when we really should be working on that. So the way you do a task triage, you write down everything you have to do next week. And then you also write down the things that you should do next week. And if you want to be really ambitious, the things you would like to do. And then you write down realistically how many hours you have available each day for work. And
Mhm,
you have to obviously leave times for meals and relaxing, and you need to build in some margin because often things take longer than you expect.
right.
So then you compare the two lists, and you after you prioritize all the things that are on your to-do list, then you see how many of them would actually fit in the number of hours you have available, and that can be a real eye-opener. I
Mhm.
mean, often when I do this, my list would take 80 hours, and I'm only planning to work 40. So
See, that's why I like to use the project management technique on myself called self-deception. I just lie to myself. I can, it should take 4 hours, but I can get it done in two.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, one strategy I've found that's really helpful with that is I started keeping a work log several years ago. Now, at first I thought, you know, it seems kind of unnecessary, but I had learned it from someone else, and um, they did it for fun. But
Yeah.
I I realized after a year or two how valuable it was. So when I was writing a book, after a little while of my work keeping a work log, I had a really good idea of how long it would take me to write a certain number of words,
Hmm.
or how long it would take to get it set up to publish on Amazon. And so when we started publishing our translated books, then I knew how long it takes to get a book set up on Amazon or to get the layout done or something like that. And so with translation, I've kept very, very detailed work logs. And now when we start a new book, I have a very, very good idea of how long it's going to take it to be translated, how long it's going to take for the revision, how long it's going to take for the proofreading. It's all broken down in my spreadsheet
Hmm.
with a range based on past experience. But if I was just guessing, my guesses would probably be too optimistic. But I've accumulated all that data now that I have real hard facts that say, well, this is how long it took me on that project and that. So I found that I've been able to be more accurate when I'm estimating the time I need.
Cool. I am not accurate at all. Never have been, never will be. Usually I just double the time, and that's about what it takes. So if I think it's going to take 2 hours, I just add 4 hours. And if I happen to get it done in 2 hours, yay, I can go on to the next thing. But more than likely, 4 hours is what it's going to take.
I can see how it would be different with fiction, though, because you're not just trying to put on paper things that you've learned. You're trying to be creative and imaginative, and you can't really put a time on that, can you?
Well, yeah, and this also kind of flows into my IT consulting that I do, just because when somebody says, "Hey, can you come out and fix this?" Yeah, I'm going to schedule like half a day for this problem, just because usually it's problem after problem after this, then a lot of "Hey, could yous?" Hey, could you do this while you're here? Hey, do you mind? My printer's got a streak on it. Hey, do you mind if you reprogram my entire firewall real quick? Just take you 5 minutes, right? Yeah, you bet. You bet. Yeah, I'll get right on that. And usually customers are not happy when you say I can't do that today. I need to come back, because then there's another trip charge and another, 4 hours that they have to pay for. So they're usually, they're always trying to push you into getting something done a little faster than normally you could do. So, it takes a little bit of, um, it takes a little bit of politicking, and it also takes a little bit of, time management to try and figure out where that comes in. Writing's an entirely different thing. I can sit down and write 600 words in 4 hours, and then some days I can sit down and write 8,000 words in 4 hours, easy. And it just kind of depends on, I don't know, my emotional state or whatever. The one thing that I started adopting when I became self-employed was the Eisenhower decision matrix. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
I love that. Just because it's a real quick way of, okay, it's either important and urgent, or important and not urgent, or not important and urgent, and it kind of breaks it into those quadrants, and then you just kind of decide what you're going to do with it depending on how you categorize it. And that's actually helped me out quite a bit.
I guess the hardest time I have with that is going by my urgent and my important and not by other people's. So
Yeah.
it depends on how good you are at saying no, I guess.
Well, I'm a male and I can say no anytime I want to. It's it's a natural reflex. I'm Dr. No. Actually, that's wrong. I usually say yes, I can do it in 3 days, and then call them back and say, nope, can't do that. It'll be 4 days or 6 days or whatever. But yeah, try and be accommodating. But anyway, that's enough of my personal problems. So what else? You have a online class.
Yes, I have a course called Timekeepers Essentials, and it's not super in depth, but it'll give you what you need to set up your workspace, your schedule, and your systems. So an hour a day for 10 days would take care of it, as long as you didn't have a lot of implementation. For example, if you didn't even have an office yet at home and you had to buy furniture and all that and start from scratch, obviously it's going to take you a little longer. But as far as going through the course and doing the worksheets, an hour a day would be plenty. And in 10 days, you could really see a difference in your time management skills. I believe that it would help you gain at least an hour a day and maybe more.
Okay. Which is sometimes very precious.
Yes.
An hour a day. I wonder what that'd be like. But anyway. So you can get this at what website?
Well, my website that has information about my books and everything is lianergrant.com. So I'll spell it because it's a little different. It's the French way. So LIANERGRANT.com.
Okay.
But if you want something easy to remember for the course, it's timekeepersacademy.com.
Very cool. Very cool. So you wrote this book. I'm sorry, I lost my notes.
Help or have to work from home.
Yeah, the one before that, how to raise your
give yourself
a raise. I'm sorry.
So the two books are almost identical. Okay. Give Yourself a Raise is specifically for freelancers. So what I mean by that is anybody who can control how much they make per hour by how much work they get done per hour. So they're not receiving an hourly salary. They're receiving, for example, an amount per project, or a translator, it would be an amount per word. And so they can directly influence their income or the amount of time they have to work by being more efficient with their time. And so same principles in both books, but in Help I Have to Work from Home, it doesn't assume that you can control your income that way. It's more about controlling how long you have to work. Because a lot of people, when they made the switch to working from home during the pandemic, their 8-hour days suddenly turned into 10 or 12.
Oh,
and so,
sure.
Just because they weren't used to being surrounded by the distractions, or they weren't maybe able to set up a separate office like they may have had at work. Just so many changes. And, we were all kind of emotionally upside down because of what was going on. So just so hard to concentrate. And so that was why I released that in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, which we were hoping was going to be short. So anyway.
I think Netflix has really caused a lot of problems for people.
I heard something interesting about Netflix. They have stated that their biggest competitor is sleep.
Yeah, I can see that.
they're not fighting another business. They're competing with your sleep to get your attention.
I
So
don't, I don't know how many people I've talked to just in normal conversations, but during this pandemic, they've, and these are the same people that are like, oh, I can't get anything done, and I'm so tired and da. And, complaint. And then in the next sentence, I caught up on all 9 seasons of The Walking Dead. How'd you do that? I did it in a week. Oh, I see the problem now. And then, of course, Disney Plus came out. So those of us with kids have watching, Frozen and Frozen 2 9,000 times each, you know. But I think the evolution of technology has been great as far as, I mean, you're in Quebec and I'm in Wisconsin and we're sitting here having a conversation. This type of stuff is very cool. The video streaming portion of it can really suck your time away.
yeah. And they talk now about Zoom fatigue.
Yeah. I didn't believe it. I really didn't. Have you experienced it?
Well, I had a couple of conferences that
Uh-huh.
I had reserved, and fortunately, they went virtual with them, which I was really happy. Otherwise, they would
Yeah.
have been canceled. But being on screen, interacting all day it's tiring.
Yeah.
So yeah, after 3 days, it was, I just wanted to zone out.
It was it I did the same thing. I had a 3-day conference. And then there's a 4th day that got pushed towards, instead of it was supposed to be like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I had a VIP pass for another day on Monday. It was supposed to be the special one-on-one type thing or whatever. And Friday was great. It started in the afternoon, and the kickoff, and you're all excited. I'm going to learn some new stuff. And Saturday came around and there's an awful lot of hard work. And then Saturday night, there was a karaoke. So we did karaoke on a Zoom call, which was hilarious. But at the same time, it started at, I think, 9 o'clock in the morning. So you go downstairs, get breakfast, come back up, and log into Zoom. And at 9 o'clock, you start working. And then you get an hour for lunch, except for I was in this VIP thing where you work, it was a working lunch for your hour, and then supper, and then you went into karaoke. On Sunday, I'm like, I don't even want to see my computer, and I normally don't feel that way about computers. I'm very computer centric, but Sunday was hard to get through, and I was so glad that they pushed the next meeting off till the following Friday, because I had 4 days of not being on a dang Zoom call. So then I did Zoom calls with clients and stuff like that. And I dreaded it, and I had to take a day off, just, a day off from being on my computer. I had some other work I could do that was building a server rack and stuff, but and I thought about it, and somebody said, well, you have Zoom fatigue. And it's like, that's not real. Oh yeah, it is. But that's a long story for not much content. So anyway, tell me about your translation business. Or you're a certified translator. You translate from
I translate
English
from English to French or French to English.
Okay.
But the work with my volunteer team, we do English to French.
Okay.
And so the reason I got into that is when we moved to Quebec 12 years ago from Ontario.
Yeah. They speak a lot of Yiddish up there.
We discovered, to our horror, that our charitable organization hardly had any materials in French. And so I had this bright idea of going to university to get my BA in translation.
Sure.
And because before I'd had this perception that if you could speak both languages, you could do written translation, and that's just not the case. You need training and experience, and it's an art, really. So I was doing my BA in translation, and it just became more and more evident that the job was much bigger than me, and we needed a team. And so I formed a volunteer team. We call them the King's Translators. And after that, I decided to go on and do master's and doctoral research so that I could help other nonprofits set up a team like we had, because I couldn't find any precedent for it. All of the volunteer translation information that I could find and research was, large businesses with collaborative software programs, and I couldn't find any examples of where an organization had a small internal team of translators that they worked closely with. And so I created my own, and then I did doctoral research to refine our methods, and I did experiments with my own team. And at the end of it, I was able to identify an ideal system for setting up this type of team, and also training modules, which once I get started talking about this, it's hard for me to stop. So you just stop me
go
when
ahead.
you need. So basically, when I did my translation training, it was a BA program, and we learned hundreds of translation principles. But for my volunteer team, they couldn't all go to university, and I couldn't teach them hundreds of principles. So I had to create a new way to train them. And so I was able to identify 9, I like to call paradigm shifts, that if I could get them to think differently, then they would start to implement all the principles I had learned because they were thinking differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just to give you one example.
Sounds like you got another book in the making.
Oh, it's coming, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I have to publish it by March because I put an embargo on my thesis. They can't release it until March because they know I want to publish a book. So the clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking.
Yes.
All right.
So just to give you a very simple example, one of the concepts is that just because a word looks the same in both languages does not mean that it has the same meaning.
Yep.
And so there are some really, really amusing examples of this. So I don't know if you want me to give you a couple or not.
Well, I was talking to an author that lived in Japan for a while. And she said that the word which is kind of a, in the English language is kind of a, it's a pause. It's a, I'm thinking with, it's a verbal cue to say, just hang on, yeah. So, I mean, you're trying to give yourself some time to mentally catch up with, something. So it's like this verbal pause. In Japanese, evidently, it means something entirely different. And so somebody asked her a question and she said, and the guy looked at her like,
Well, just a really simple example, the word deception. There's a French word that looks the same, except there's an accent on the first E, déception, but it means disappointment.
Okay.
So that's just a very simple example. So I don't have time to teach all my volunteer translators we call them faux amis, false friends or false cognates. I don't have time to teach them all that, but I just taught them one simple thing. Don't assume that it means the same thing. Look it up in the dictionary. Sure. And that one paradigm shift has saved them from making hundreds of errors. So the set of, I call them best practices that I developed, they're all based on those types of paradigm shifts. So if I could just get them to think about it differently, get rid of their assumptions, then they will become good translators through experience and the, other training that they get. But rather than all of them having to try to go to university, then they're not even available for the next 3 or 4 years.
That would that would stifle your project a bit.
Yes, it would. So, but I found with all my translation, I spent over a decade in university. I started when I was past 40 already, 3 degrees in translation. But I found that I'm a much better writer because of all the time I've spent translating and editing. So now when I go to write in English, it's easier for me. And maybe going back to what I said earlier, maybe that's why I don't have to do a lot of rough drafts, because I've been able to hone my craft through that.
Well, I can tell you that I haven't honed my craft at all, and I Google lots of stuff. So, yeah,
well, speaking of Google, can I tell you one funny translation fail?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's an expression, well, I mentioned my book for freelancers. So there's an expression, freelance translation, which in French is traduction à la pige. And when you put it in Google Translate, in English, it says it's translate to the pig. So, so I
Wait,
there's this
oh, wait a minute. You're saying Google is wrong?
there's this
Because
myth that Google Translate is like the solution, and they have some really hilarious errors because they can't think like humans,
you
right?
know,
So
yeah, I
they
always
don't know
wonder about like
context.
Apple shows that application that you can get on the phone where you say something in English and you flash it to them and it, they're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, sure, you know, 2 blocks that way, and then they speak back into the phone and it translates to them 2 blocks that way, and I just wonder how accurate that really is.
Well, here's the thing. In the last 20, 30 years, there's been great advances made in that area. The
Mhm.
problem is the 10% that's horrible. That can
Right.
really mess you up.
So you ask somebody in English, where is the cheese shop, and you end up at a brothel. That
Yeah.
that would be that would
Well,
be
and
one of
we've
those.
just found that we've just decided we're going to use human translators because here's the ironic thing. Um, you can use machine translation for a base translation, but the only people really qualified to fix it afterwards, which is called post editing, would
Mhm.
be people who have been trained in translation principles and traps.
Sure.
So the ironic part of that is that most of the people who use automatic translation not only have no training in translation, but they may not even be bilingual.
Sure.
So the people who it's most dangerous for to use are the ones that use it.
The funniest story I have on well, it's not really a translation story, but I was talking to a person that lived on a reservation, Indian reservation back in South Dakota, and it was during Boy Scouts or whatever. And we just, and I was probably 17 or whatever, and yeah, I think I was around 17. And this guy was telling me that the funniest thing in the world is when like you watch some of the older westerns where the Indians are talking and they're talking in a language, they have subtitles like,
Mhm.
we're going to go, raid this camp or whatever. And the Indians would actually say the dirtiest things to each other, and no one would know it except for the Indians because no one spoke their language. So if they're
Right.
speaking, Sioux, then they just start like, oh, look at him, he's whatever. And no one could figure out when they'd watch these movies in the theaters why the Indians were always laughing. It's because it was more of a comedy to them than anything. They went to it just to see what the actors were saying, and sometimes it's just gibberish. But on the other hand, but
Yeah.
I just thought that was kind of funny.
Well, to bring this full circle, actually, back to authors, I had recently published a blog for Self Publishing School about getting your book translated
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the traps to watch out for.
Yeah.
So basically, you have to make sure that it's going to be someone who understands the area that you write in, because not every translator is a good translator in every area of life. So there's specific terminology, things like that. It should be somebody who's got some training and experience,
Mhm.
because just because they can speak 2 languages doesn't mean that they're going to be good at translating and writing. They might
Well,
be a horrible writer and a
you've
wonderful
seen
speaker.
you've seen those offers from, there's a couple of different sites that you can go out and you can contract people to do things for you, whether it be editing or graphics or
Hmm.
whatever. Where they, I will translate your book in 3 days, type thing. And I
Yeah,
always kind of
they'll,
imagine them just cutting and pasting it into Google and saying,
yeah.
"Okay, this is good," or something like that. And you would have no idea. I mean, I don't read Russian, so I mean, oh look,
Mhm.
this looks perfect, and you could be making a huge mistake and wasting money.
Yeah. And it's a shame because you take a lot of time trying to build up your reputation as an author, and you
Hmm.
put a lot of time into your well, let's say your English book. You made sure you had it edited and you had a good cover and all these things. And so then it's a shame if the translation is embarrassing and you don't even know it.
Right, until, some kind soul points it out with a 1 star saying I was so offended or, whatever.
Yeah.
But on the
Yeah.
other hand, it's a notation to say, yeah, maybe I shouldn't trust the guy that only charged me $100 and did it in 3 days.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of scams out there. There are a lot, but
Well, and you get what you pay for, but you also have to consider the differences in a living wage in different countries. So you legitimately might find someone in another country that would do it cheaper than someone in your own country.
Oh, sure.
But if there's a huge disparity, then that's when the red flags should start going up.
So what do you think would be a good price to get a let's say a 50,000 word book translated? You know, if you're going to do it right. I mean, how much, you know, I mean, editing is going to cost you anywhere from, you know, depending on what kind of an edit, from, you know, 500 to $1,000, or, you know, a little bit more than that probably.
Okay, well, this, if you're ready to have a bit of a heart attack, I'm a certified translator in Quebec. And so I'm part of a professional order of translators. They had to assess the quality of my work before I could be certified.
Sure.
And we are not supposed to charge less than 20 cents a word.
Oh.
I mean, they can't prevent us from charging less than that. And there's a little bit of competition that goes on, but I would say it rarely goes below 15 cents a word.
Wow.
Now that's high. It's probably one of the highest in the world. But we'd like to say we do really good quality work. And the professional order says that they are there to protect the public.
Well, those are Canadian cents, right?
They're there to protect the public from our bad translations. So, so a 50,000 word book then would cost $10,000 at that rate. Yeah. Now, as a certified translator, I would tell you, if I was doing a large project for somebody, I would reduce my rate because of the volume of guaranteed work. So it's not like I'd be doing a bunch of little tiny documents where I would charge my full rate.
Right. So
you could get it done cheaper probably with a translator from elsewhere in the world, but would it be culturally relevant? You'd have to, you know, it's not just the language, sometimes it's the culture.
Oh yeah.
So I was translating a website the other day for someone because I had noticed it was really bad in English, really good in French, and really horrible in English. And so I pointed that out to them nicely, and they asked me if I would fix it. So just a really quick cultural example, when they say football in Europe, it's soccer.
Right.
Here, right? So things like that, someone who wasn't familiar with the culture, that's something they might miss, other things like that, you know. So it's not just language, it needs to be someone who understands the content, the culture, and the language, all three. So it's not cheap to get a good translation.
No, and it probably shouldn't be, realistically.
And that's why I created our volunteer group. So I was just actually doing a summary of the projects. We have over 70 or almost 70 books on Amazon now, our French translations. And it's, if you looked at it, if we had paid a professional translator, it's $1 million project.
Oh, sure.
But we leveraged the use of our volunteers, and we brought in professional revisers. And for the books that were more like textbook style, we paid a translator. But when you put in all the work from our volunteers, we did that $1 million project for about $250,000.
That's not bad.
So that's why I want to show other nonprofits how to do that, to start their own volunteer translation team or internal team.
Sure.
It's cost effective.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. 25% off or 75% off. 25% of the cost. I'm really good at numbers too. But,
So, well, thanks for letting me talk a bit about translation. You could probably tell that really jazzes me. So
it really sounds like that's your passion.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Cool. And you're going to be writing a book on your 9 tenets on, or not 9 tenets, but your 9 thought-provoking ways to translate. Huh?
Not to be too ambitious, but I want to write one book on how to set up a translation team inside your organization. And then the second book on how to learn to translate using these best practices.
Well, based on your books, you should have all the time in the world to get this done.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, it's funny that it's the perfect complement though, because I've given my time management course to my translators, my volunteers, so that they would have time to translate for us.
That would make sense. That would make sense. So just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, if you're interested in any of Liane's books, they are on Amazon under Liane R. Grant. Also lianergrant.com, or what was your translation site again?
I don't have a translation
Or
site.
I'm sorry, the school site. I'm
Uh,
sorry.
yes, Timekeepers Academy.
Timekeepers Academy. That's what it was.
Yes.
Very, very cool. And I hope that if you are having problems with time management, or just can't seem to get something done during the day, that maybe take a look at Liane's references, and it sounds like setting up your desk, cleaning off your desk. That's what I'm going to do right after this podcast, is clean this desk. Those are good ideas, and I really appreciate your openness to be able to share some of that stuff with us. Anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast, and I hope it
pleasure.
continues to grow.
I do too. It'd be really nice. There's a lot of good information coming from indie authors that need to get recognition. I think that's the greatest thing about doing something like this, is that getting the name out there, and there's a lot of references out there that they may have missed just because they didn't search the right keywords in Amazon or whatever. And so hopefully this project continues to grow. But I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And in closing, I want to say this is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast. And thank you very much for listening. And I hope you have a great day, evening, morning, or whatever it is you happen to be participating in at the time that you're listening to this. Don't forget to subscribe or follow me, depending on what podcast stream or YouTube a video you're looking at. Thanks again for all your support. Bye now.
Please subscribe. Every time you hit subscribe, an angel gets their wings. I really hate my job.